This show was produced by and first broadcast on Radio Kidnappers, Hawke's Bay's community access radio station. Thanks to New Zealand On Air for enabling us to put Hawke's Bay voices on air.
Good morning, everybody. This is Heiko from the Acupuncture on Air show on Radio Kidnappers, where every Tuesday at 11 a.m. I have a show and we play back interviews that we've done with different acupuncturists from around the country. Today we've got someone we've had on the show before, and her name is Patty McBride, who practices from Nelson. Good morning, Patty. How are you?
Good morning, Heiko. Yes, I'm very well, thanks.
And you're managing the lockdown? You're out in the garden?
I have to admit, I actually quite like lockdown.
I confess,
such a bad place to be in lockdown.
It forced me to actually have a holiday.
and we all could do with it.
So yeah, it's been fantastic. But listen, before we get started on the show, and we sort of just want to talk about what's it like actually practicing in a sort of a rural town, city, Nelson. I understand that you had another life before you took up acupuncture study, which the study was in Australia. So tell us a bit some of your life adventures after leaving school and how you ended up studying acupuncture.
Well, it was a bit roundabout. I actually studied medical technology when I first left school and worked at Christchurch Hospital for several years in the laboratories there, doing blood tests and growing bugs and things. But I knew that wasn't for me. Sitting in a lab forevermore wasn't going to do it for me. So I moved on from there and actually, by a series of moves really, ended up in hotel management. First of all here in New Zealand, and then decided to jump the Tasman and went over to Sydney and worked in hotels over there in the management line as well. But I also worked for head office of the hotel company, so they moved me up and down the country and around Australia quite a bit, and I was putting up or setting up new front office systems for them. So that was quite exciting, but I also knew that I didn't want to do that forevermore. I was studying business management at Tech and thinking this is incredibly boring and it's really not me. I'd much rather be doing herbs or astrology or something like that. So thought I'd be a naturopath, but wasn't that keen when I went to an open day at the naturopathic college. But a friend said to me, well, why don't you try acupuncture? Well, I'd never thought of acupuncture, never given it a moment's consideration. But I went to their open day, walked in the front door, and thought, this is me. This is it.
You saw the light. Okay.
Just like that. And he decided, he walked in the door and he said, I don't care what it is they teach here. Even if it's macrame, I'm going to learn it. And he did, with his partner. And all three of us, in fact, the majority of our class that went through are still in practice. And that
fantastic.
Well, we graduated in 89.
And you ended up with your degree. Any exciting stories you can tell us about anything that happened while you were studying, or was it just boring, study, exams, graduate?
It was, it sort of takes over, doesn't it? When you're studying acupuncture, there's so much to learn, and it's such a different paradigm. I had to essentially toss out my Western medical background and look at everything from a completely different perspective. So that was a bit of a challenge. But it does mean that now I can more readily step from one to the other without too much difficulty. So I think it was, my years in the laboratory weren't wasted, let's say.
Now, did you practice in Sydney when you finished?
Yes, I did. I was at the Glebe Healing Centre for quite a few years.
Right.
And that was a big multidisciplinary practice. I think there were 22 practitioners there.
Wow.
Was I the only acupuncturist? I was to start with, and then another one came and joined us. But most of the time I was there. Yeah, I practiced in Sydney for 13 years.
Wow, okay.
Before I decided to come back.
And you came back to Nelson, or where did you go?
Yes, I came straight back to Nelson. When I decided that I was moving out of Sydney and coming back to New Zealand, there was no consideration of any other part of the country, really.
Fantastic.
It was Nelson.
And when you got to Nelson, how many acupuncturists were there then, and how many are there now?
There would have been perhaps 5 in Nelson then, and now, actually in Nelson itself, probably not that many more than that, but in the top of the south we've got 14 of us.
Okay.
So and that goes right across from Golden Bay through to Blenheim. And we do get together.
I know
quite a collegial group.
I know that I had to stop off in Nelson on the way to Dunedin, and I nearly stayed there because we'd never been there, and you thought, wow, this is a nice place. But anyway, we went to Dunedin. So look, I can understand the attraction of Nelson and the weather, and also it's quite central because it's easy to get to Wellington, Christchurch. We even fly direct to Auckland, for continuing education. And then, as I know, that you've had many a trip out of Nelson to these key areas, and all acupuncture related. So how did all that come about?
Well, I managed to get talked into standing as Vice President of Acupuncture New Zealand, NZRA as it was then, and then stepped up to be President, and I held the position of President for 8 years. So whilst I was President, I was backwards and forwards from Wellington, not every week, but certainly several times a month for the better part of those 8 years, and often up to Auckland because we've got the schools up in Auckland. And then at the same time as I was President, I was also elected as Vice President of the World Federation of Acupuncture Societies. So that involved overseas travel. So I was very, very fortunate that I was in that position at the time that overseas travel was really easy. Not like
I understand that now you're involved with it's another sort of a world group, and it's called Acupuncture Now, isn't it? And it's involved with continuing education.
Yes, the Acupuncture Now Foundation started in America, and the focus is on providing education not just for practitioners but also for the general public. So we're a very small movement in New Zealand, but we have plans now that I'm back off the council to make sure that we are providing good quality CPD for the acupuncture practitioners throughout the country. Yeah.
Now tell us about your practice in Nelson, because at one stage in Sydney you were working in a great big centre with 22 other practitioners. So tell us about your practice in Nelson. Is it similar to that?
I'm actually in Richmond, which is a little bit south of Nelson.
Right.
About 15k south. So a much smaller centre than Nelson itself. I did practice in Nelson for the first 6 years that I was back in New Zealand, and I was in a multidisciplinary practice there as well, but not as big as the one I was in Sydney. Then when I moved out to Richmond, I was a bit concerned because I thought, I'm going to lose my client base because people won't want to travel to Richmond. But what I hadn't taken into account was that when you're in Richmond, the catchment area is actually much greater because all the country people use Richmond as their service town. So I get people coming to see me from as far south as Murchison and from over the hill in Golden Bay. So I actually didn't lose any of my Nelson people, but I picked up an awful lot more that wouldn't go in as far as Nelson because they would only come as far as Richmond.
Yeah, that was one of the questions I was going to ask, because I actually checked, is Nelson officially, is it a city or a town, but Google informs me that it is actually a city. But as you said, that you get a large catchment area all around the city, and particularly, I presume that you're getting a number of country patients, farmers, and people working in the rural. Are they very open to acupuncture, or they're a bit cautious?
I don't have any difficulty filling my books every week.
Yeah.
I run a busy practice. I actually work now from home, and that's been quite a change for me, but it's working really well and I'm enjoying it, and it seems that the people enjoy coming here as well, so that's good. But yes, I do have some, I don't advertise, it's all word of mouth, and yes, the country people are very open to it. I once had this is quite a funny story, I had a locum come and look after my practice one year when I was away, and she was from inner city Sydney and had grown up in Sydney, and she found it very, very difficult to get her head around the fact that I was seeing people that, for example, a gentleman that had been pruning apple trees, he was in his 80s, pruning apple trees with a chainsaw, and had dropped a fairly substantial branch of the apple tree on his shoulder. So she had no reference to that. And then someone else came in, they'd hurt their back as they were pulling a calf out of a swamp.
Right.
My poor locum really was used to people that went to the gym, and she really did find all these country people quite a challenge, quite an eye opener.
Yeah, and I know being in a smaller city or a not so populated, as say Auckland or somewhere, do you specialise in any condition, or would you say that you specialise in being a generalist?
I'm very much a generalist now.
Yeah.
When I was in Sydney, my practice was probably 85% to do with pregnancy. So
right.
I was very much in a specialised practice then. I trained as a childbirth educator as well, so that was an area of great interest for me. But moving to a much smaller centre, in Sydney, my practice was between two of the main maternity hospitals, so it worked really well for me. But coming to a smaller centre like Richmond, well, Nelson generally, you can't run such a specialised practice. But I love it. I really enjoy that I don't know what's going to come through the door every day, and I treat everyone from little babies right through to those in their 80s and 90s.
Yep, those farmers at 80 years old with their chainsaws. So listen, I know that you've now finished with working on the board of Acupuncture with Acupuncture New Zealand, and but have you got any other little things to keep you entertained? Are you going to be maybe doing any guest lecturing, teaching for the college in Auckland, or organising more seminars for the Acupuncture Now Foundation, or are you just going to just settle back and see your patients from home?
No, I'm actually part of the working group that has been put together because we have been working for many years to get acupuncture recognised, or Chinese medicine generally recognised under the HPCA Act, the Health Practitioners Competence Assurance Act, and that actually came through in July this year. So there is still work to be done in that regard, and I'm still very much involved at that level. But yes, gardening's quite appealing.
All right, well, listen, we better finish up now, so thanks very much for coming onto the show. But just before we go, could you just give us the best phone number, so anyone in the Nelson area, if they want to contact you, that they can ring you?
Probably my mobile number is best, and that's 021 104 3592.
Okay, fantastic. Oh, listen, thanks for coming on the show, and I'll also put the link up to your website in the YouTube comment section, so that if people didn't get that number, they can go there. And we're just going to finish off the show with some music. I mean, I had to Google this. It's a artist who was born in Nelson, but I think he made his fame in Wellington, and the name is Rian Sheehan.
Rian Sheehan.
Yeah. Okay. And do you know him?
Not personally, but yes, definitely heard of him.
No, the music. Yeah, no, I'd never heard of it. I quite liked it, actually. And we're going to listen to one of his production songs, and it's called Still. So here we go with that. Thanks again for coming on the show, and we'll see everybody on our next show.
This show was produced by and first broadcast on Radio Connectors, Hawke's Bay's community access radio station. Thanks to New Zealand On Air for enabling us to put Hawke's Bay voices on air.